In this video, we'll take a quick look at 5 interesting and thoughtful articles. We'll talk about war entrepreneurship, monetizing AI, an expensive future, and opine if DD even exists. And since we are in a new year, we'll also talk about a New Year's resolution. All that for just a few minutes of your time. So let's get on with it. It's just a fascinating read. The numbers are mind-boggling, and that there are many small guys who made a lot of money, even though there is an air of mystery around that. One of the most fundamental things about war is that it is expensive. And that usually, there are many who have made a fortune, either working for or financing the conflict. For the large majority among us, who have thankfully never experienced the ravages and the opportunities of war, one can feel amazed by these stories. Like this American guy, Doug Edelman, who moved to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, in 1998, opens a bar, and starts a fuel trading business, along with a local chap. And 3 years later, the American armed forces descend en masse, and make Bishkek their base. There is a lot of equipment, like planes and tanks, and everything needs fuel. So what does our man do? He sells fuel to the American armed forces. And over the many years of war, his business generates billions in revenue. I mean, what are the odds? SenseTime is an interesting company. Its IPO went well, and the stock took off after listing. Recently, the US government put sanctions on SenseTime, which prevented US-based investors from investing in the company, which put the IPO at risk. However, the Chinese government stepped in to buy more shares in the company. As a result, the IPO went smoothly, and there was decent demand from retail investors and hedge funds for the stock. SenseTime is interesting because monetizing artificial intelligence is a hard problem to solve. There are 2 popular ways in which companies have chosen to solve this problem. One option is obviously governments. China has a rich and influential one, which wants software to better govern its citizens. Other countries and their governments may make different choices, but AI-driven surveillance is popular in China. So SenseTime decided to go down this path to monetize its AI software. Of course, the other quite popular and effective option to monetize AI is by selling ads. Or at least mediate commerce in some way, which is what companies like Google, Facebook, and to some extent, Amazon do. Just like the story with SenseTime, the key player here is the Chinese government. While the numbers are humongous, it feels like trying to find your way in complete darkness. Like the feeling of being slightly discombobulated. The mind throws up some fundamental questions like, what is China? What is the Chinese government? Is all the bad news only because of the whims of one person? That feels unlikely because China is such a large nation. We know that Chinese companies have used the VIE structure to list on foreign exchanges for a long time. And why is it suddenly wrong to do that now? Even more fundamental questions pop up in the brain. Like, does DD even exist? How can a ride-hailing company be so expensive to run? Why does the company have such big losses? Is this a Ponzi scheme? Who knows, and probably we'll never know. While no one really talks about it, the singular concern with a greener future is that everything will be more expensive. The reason is simple. It is that less polluting sources of energy are more expensive than more polluting sources of energy. For example, it is more expensive to extract and burn natural gas than coal. And yet, natural gas is preferred over coal because the former makes fewer CO2. Something similar happens with nuclear fission and every other fossil fuel. It is more expensive to make electricity from nuclear fission than it is from burning fossil fuel. Mainly because nuclear fission can be risky, and it produces unpleasant byproducts which require a lot of money to dispose of properly. So natural gas and nuclear fission are problematic, because they are 2 imperfect solutions to making less pollution. And one of the ways to solve this problem is to squint a little and call them green. France is a big proponent of nuclear energy because they have invested heavily into it. Almost 70% of their electricity needs are met by nuclear fission. And Eastern European nations are big proponents of natural gas, because of their legacy of close connection with Russia, which has lots of it. So it makes sense that France and Eastern Europe will find a common ground in designating both nuclear fission and natural gas as green. In this entire story, also notable is Germany's absence. They used to produce a lot of nuclear power, but moved away from it, and now get a lot of their electricity from wind and solar, and from France. No new year should go to waste. So we'll talk about quitting smoking. The best way to do it is to just stop. That's it. Every other way is suboptimal. It is interesting to note that cigarettes are a $705 billion industry. And that stop smoking industry is a $65 billion a year big. For context, toothpaste is a $30 billion a year industry, electricity is $10 billion a year, JWST took $10 billion to make and operate, an aircraft carrier, a hugely destructive piece of equipment, costs $15 billion. So that's it for this one. The links to these articles are in the description, if you find them interesting. Also, please consider subscribing, if you enjoyed the video. It helps out this tiny channel a whole lot. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.